I was not enjoying retirement. I'm not sure if I thought it through. And so yes, I was just kind of knocking around the house, and I didn't realize I was in her hair that much, but I must have been. But I think what Sherry was really saying is, he wasn't done with the place, so take him back and wring it out of him. Right. And so I think that's what's going to happen this time, based on the workload.
That's funny.
Welcome to Being the Change, the official podcast of James Madison University, brought to you by Madison Magazine. Each episode brings to you stories of how members of the JMU community combine intellect with action to live lives of purpose and meaning. That's Being the Change.
What's up, JMU? Welcome to Being the Change. I'm here today with JMU Interim President Charlie King. Hey, Charlie.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for joining us.
Sure.
And if you didn't know, Charlie has been part of the JMU community for more than 25 years. He was hired by Dr. Carrier.
Correct.
And he worked for Dr. Rose and President Alger. And he is Senior Vice President of Administration and Finance, which is basically the Chief Operating Officer of the institution. And he retired in 2022 and has now come back to be interim president while the university searches. And I'd like to note shortly before Charlie actually was off the job, the Board of Visitors of JMU renamed the first building that Charlie ever oversaw the construction of, ISAT, is now called King Hall. So it's quite an honor for you, Charlie. So welcome to the podcast. How's it going as interim president?
Well, it's been interesting. I'll say that. I've been on it now, going on 4 weeks. What I've been amazed about is how much time people want of me. I wasn't expecting that. I knew I was going to be busy. I knew there was a lot of catching up. But what I wasn't expecting was how everybody wants a piece of me. And so I'm having to learn to say no a little bit, which is not very difficult for me, as you know, Andy. But I wasn't expecting that. It's been fun, especially reconnecting with people that I'd worked with for a long, long time. It's been interesting dealing with trying to get ready for school, because that's what I'm focused on right now, because we've got a big class coming in, over 5,000 students, and I want to make sure that opening goes well.
That's right. Well, when President Alger announced his moving to American University in March, did you have any inkling that this would be coming your way?
Well, to be honest with you, I did think about it for a second. But I said, nah, I'm retired and I've been gone, and I'm sure that's not going to be a possibility. But then the phone started ringing, and I was getting calls from alumni. I was getting calls from previous board members, people at the university. And I said, well, maybe I should think about this more seriously. And the more Sherry and I talked about it, the more excited we became. And so I called the rector and said, I want to put my name in the hat. And I was very honored that they selected me to be in this interim role.
That must have been so wonderful to get those calls from alumni and past board members encouraging you to put your hat in.
Oh, it was. I have to be honest with you. Everybody likes to be stroked, and I felt really good about getting those calls. When you sit around that table for 25 years and with 3 presidents, I think it's only human to sit there at some point and say, well, how would I make that decision, or how would I do that? Right. And so I'm getting that opportunity now to make those decisions.
For good, bad, or indifferent, right?
Correct. And, one of the things that I have a reputation for around here is getting things done, and making decisions not my problem. Now, I may not make it right every time, but I'll make a decision. And I think people are enjoying a little bit of that, to have that newness back with the old King approach about we're going to get it done.
Well, you're pretty well known as a charge ahead leader, but your folks all are so loyal and all love you. How do you combine those two kind of traits?
That's a good question. I think the reason people like working for me is because I allow them to do their jobs. Now, when they don't do their jobs, I'll tell them real quickly they're not doing their jobs. And I think people appreciate that rather than letting things build up or not correct things when they need to be corrected. But I think the fact that I let them do their jobs and trust them to do their jobs, people like that. And I think the other thing people like is to be challenged. And I'm a challenger. If I see things, I walk the campus on a daily basis if I can, and I see things, and I'll pick up the phone and call people. One of the funny stories that I'll tell you is Craig Short. Craig's back now, but when Craig was here originally doing the facilities management, he set a goal to find things before I could. And I took that, I liked that approach.
Right.
Because he got tired of me calling him about this or that. And he did a really good job.
Did you put any money on it?
No, I didn't put any money on it. But before I came back this time, I knew I had the job, obviously, for 2 months. And so I was on campus, and I started taking pictures of things and sending them to Craig. And he wrote back and said, well, I guess there's a new sheriff in town. And I said, amen, brother.
Back at it.
I'm back at it.
Well, do you have any insights on why the board selected you as interim?
Well, I can speak for what I think.
Right.
You need to ask the board, I guess, that question to be more specific. But I think it was a couple things. I think, one, they knew me. Lots of them knew me. I think the fact that so many people that were on the boards prior to now called them and talked about my abilities. But I think the real thing was they knew I'd worked here for 25 years. And as you mentioned, as being the chief financial officer and senior vice president, I knew how just about where everything was at. Mm-hmm. I knew how operations needed to be run. I understood, if you're a good CFO, you have to understand the mission of the university and you have to understand the needs of the university. Mm-hmm. And over 25 years, especially with us facing the Great Recession, us facing COVID, I think they felt like I had the experience to be a steady hand while they were looking for a president. In fact, when I had my small interview for the position, I told the rector, I said, I want you guys to focus on hiring the best presidents you can hire and let me run the place. Mm-hmm. You shouldn't have to worry about that. And I said, I think I can do that job for you. And so I think that came across to people. I think the fact that I knew a lot of people in Richmond, and I didn't have to hit. A new person would have had a lot of time to develop relationships that I don't have to do.
Sure.
I can hit the ground running.
Right.
My portfolio was larger than most CFOs. I had athletics, I had government relations, and I think the board liked the fact that I had that kind of experience because most presidents are going to have to deal with all those areas, plus academics and plus advancement. So I think my experience probably helped me the most because if you think about it, from the time John announced he was leaving to when he left, there wasn't a lot of time there.
Right.
And so they felt like they needed somebody that could come in and get started right away rather than bringing, say, for somebody. A lot of schools will bring somebody from the outside in, a retired president. Mm-hmm. And I think they knew I could hit the ground running. So I'm kind of repeating myself now, but and I hope the fact that they trusted me from working here and getting to know them. One of the things I like to tell people is during COVID and during the Great Recession, this institution didn't lay off one person and we didn't miss one paycheck. And there's a lot of schools that can't say that.
Right.
And so I take a lot of pride in that, and I think the board took confidence in that.
Right. Well, you told me one time that you put yourself through school and you know what it feels like to have to pay for college.
Right.
And that folks are spending a lot of money on this experience, and you really want them to have the right experience. And having the people here to deliver it is really what's critical.
Oh, it's absolutely. In this day and time, when you read and hear all the things nationally about the value of higher education is not worth it, and we do see a lot of people not going to higher ed right now. Mm-hmm. That's why you got to perform every day. And I know people don't like to hear this a lot on college campuses, but I'm a big customer service guy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I live it and breathe it, because when I came up through the auxiliaries. And for those of you listening, you may not know what I'm talking about, but it's looking after the bookstore and the housing and the food service, all the things that you don't get any state money for.
Right.
And so if you're going to be successful there, you better understand customer service.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I got to JMU, that became a high priority in the Administration Finance Division. In fact, it was so important to us, we gave an annual award for customer service. And I didn't pick the person. It was a committee. And people took a lot of pride in winning that award.
Well, you know, when I was in the room when the board announced that you were to be interim, and it was a nice bit of theater when you and your wife Sherry walked in,
Right.
and everyone was like, "Well, I guess we know who the interim president's going to be." And when Rector Mary Beth Herod was introducing you, she actually apologized to your wife Sherry for taking you out of retirement. And she responded, "You can have him." So were you just knocking around the house?
Well, I think a lot of people knew this. I was not enjoying retirement. I'm not sure if I thought it through. And so yes, I was just kind of knocking around the house, and I didn't realize I was in her hair that much, but I must have been. But I think what Sherry was really saying is, he wasn't done with the place, so take him back and wring it out of him. Right. And so I think that's what's going to happen this time based on the workload.
That's funny.
Yeah.
You know, when we published a piece in Madison magazine about you upon your retirement, and we quoted a very close friend of yours, Jim Riley, who was, he and his wife were chair of the Parents Council for years, and you guys became friendly.
Right.
And when I was talking to him about how much has changed at JMU since his daughter started in the 90s, he said, yeah, a lot has changed, but I think what's most incredible is what hasn't changed at JMU. And he credited your leadership a great deal with keeping the small school feel, even though we've become a mid-sized university. Right. How do you feel about that?
Well, I'm honored that he said that, but I don't think Charlie King caused all that. I think the culture goes way back to Ron Carrier. And Ron Carrier had that approach to things, and Lynn Rose continued that.
Right.
And, of course, I worked for both of them and primarily for Lynn. And so, what you don't understand unless you've gone to this place or unless you've worked at this place, it is a special institution to work at. I used to tell people when I first got here, people would say, "Why did you leave Radford? Why did you come to JMU?" I said, "I got so tired of hearing about the JMU way, I just decided to come up here and work here to find out what it was."
Right.
And it is truly a special place, and there is something called the JMU way, and you'd have to go to school here, and you know this, Andy, you'd have to work here to know what I'm talking about. Right. It's hard to explain. But I think the fact that we care about people, we particularly care about students. We're very student-centered. We look after the place. So lots of times I hear from people, not so much people in Virginia, but out of state people say, "We thought you were private." You have that feel. You have that look. And so it has become more difficult at 22,000 than it was when 12,000 when I got here.
Right.
But I think it's the people that have adopted that culture, and we pass it down on to the next generation of employees coming. How many times have you heard people say, "I planned on coming here and staying 2 years, and I spent 30"?
That's right.
I think it's the culture of the place.
Yeah.
It's a special place. And so I'm glad that people still think that way about the small feel of this campus and how we treat people. I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm going to say it. We get a ton of kids that come here because they've gone down the road to see a school in Blacksburg, or they've gone over the mountain to see another school. They stop here just by chance, and we treat them so well, and they feel so comfortable here, they decide to come to JMU. So,
well, I had a dad walk up to me once in Shoker Hall during an academic open house, and I was standing with Bob Reed, who was then the dean,
Right.
and we were both wearing suits. And the dad walked over and said, "You guys in charge?" And I pointed at Bob and said, "There's the dean." And he said, "I got to tell you, we were at UVA yesterday, and they spent the whole time telling us how lucky we would be if we got in.
right.
Over here, you're telling us how lucky JMU would be if you decided to come here.
Absolutely.
And
That's my point.
yeah, and he felt it.
Yeah.
You know, I was chatting with Ron Carrier once, and he said that his secret sauce was, let's never take ourselves so seriously that we forget about the students.
Correct.
And that has been...
He laid the groundwork,
He did.
Andy. He laid the groundwork and was insistent upon it. And Linwood worked for him for years and carried that right on. And, you know how many people have worked here for years and retired here? We just all bought into, drunk the Kool-Aid, I guess you would say. And I worked at 2 other institutions, good institutions, nothing critical about them, but no way they had the feel or approach things like we do at JMU.
Yeah. Well, you know, one of the things that everyone's really been excited about the last couple of years has been our pretty much unprecedented success in athletics. And athletics reported to you for years during the period where we were really building, and you and Jeff Bourne were working together.
Right.
Folks are so excited about moving forward. How do you see this moving into the next era? Well,
I'm as excited as they are. You're right. When I took over athletics 20-some years, Lynn had been president for a short period of time. We recognized that Dr. Carey had built a lot of facilities to start an athletic program, but we were at the point that they needed to be improved and in some cases rebuilt. And I think we did a pretty nice job of that. When we were looking at changing conferences, every conference that came to look at us, every one of them said, you've got the best facilities of any school in the conference. So we take a lot of pride in that. But to answer your question, last 2 years has just been unbelievable. I was at a conference meeting with the presidents in June in Atlanta. Sunbelt did a whole presentation over what media hits and what the media had done for the conference over the last 12 months because of the success. And they had all these different categories. And guess who was at the top of every category except one? And that was JMU. So it has just really helped us nationally. We've always talked about this national image and becoming this national institution. And I know people are critical of how much we spend on athletics sometimes, but it really has paid a big dividend for this institution. And I think the future is bright with regard to that. However, I want to be clear here. Some of the things that have happened in the last 12 months with the NCAA that we're going to have to deal with are going to be very, very expensive.
Yeah.
And when I lay my head down at night right now, one of the things I'm thinking about is how in the world are we going to accomplish what they've said now you can do. For example, they've just increased the maximum number of scholarships that we can award in just about every sport. So just take football, for example. They're going from 85 to 105. Multiply that times what an out-of-state tuition scholarship costs, because that's the way you got to figure it.
Right.
You can't just say they're all going to come from in-state. So we've got some real challenges ahead. But every other school in America does too.
Right.
And I'm sure we'll figure it out like everybody else does. But I'm really excited about the future of athletics.
The digital marketing team reports to me, and over the last year, the number of times that the Google search for JMU or James Madison University has gone up over 1,000%.
Wow.
Would make your head spin. I mean, our name got out there so unbelievably. So from my perspective, it's money well spent.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And, to have game day 3 times, to be ranked, your second year of being an FBS, for the basketball team to have the year they had and get to beat Wisconsin, you can't underestimate what that's worth to the university.
Yeah.
People ask me all the time now, has it impacted our enrollment? I don't know the answer to that. People say that. What I do say to them is it can't hurt.
Yeah. It's a name recognition play. Yeah. One of the other major parts of your portfolio was government relations, you mentioned earlier. And you've got a lot of respect down in Richmond, not only because of the way that you've run this place, but because JMU is seen as a really efficient overachiever. I've heard it's been called the White Knight in Richmond. How did we get that status?
Well, I think it comes back from a lot of years. What we tried to do, particularly Dr. Rose and I, is we made made sure that people understood we were not going to ask for more than we needed. And if we said we was going to use it for a specific thing, that's what we went back and done. And I don't think that always happens in Richmond. And so we built up a level of trust there with people over the years. The other thing that I was just fortunate, I was here during the time in the late 90s, early 2000s, the state was saying, we got to grow, we got to provide places for students to go to college. And JMU raised their hand, and we took a ton of kids with the promise that funding would follow. Well, the funding never followed,
right.
but we took them anyway. And I think people in Richmond remember that.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, our popularity just went out of sight.
Mm-hmm.
And so that helped us in Richmond. But, Carrier had a reputation there. People loved him there. I used to get so frustrated when we'd go to Richmond and we'd be walking down the halls and everybody wanted to stop and talk to him. You would have thought he was the governor of the state. Right. And so I just say, Lynn, I'm going on. We're late. And as soon as I'd go to the office we were supposed to be at, I say, I'm here with Dr. Carrier. He's running late. Oh, don't worry about it. We know Ron. He'll be here eventually. Right. But we had that reputation up there of being trustworthy. Mm-hmm. And people up there could see what was happening in Harrisonburg. Mm-hmm. And I think they wanted that to continue because we were graduating people on time. We were taking more and more Virginians. And because of that, I think we built a reputation there that's helped us in the long term. Mm-hmm. Now, I did 5 years of this at Radford, so I did 30 years of going to Richmond. And so I developed relationships that takes years to develop, mm-hmm. and it takes years to develop trust. And we were very fortunate that between Dr. Carrier and Lynn and myself, we covered a lot of ground up there. Mm-hmm. I'll never forget when we first started going up there, the Democrats controlled everything completely. And Carrier just would not go by and see Kirk Cox. Kirk was a young Republican, and I said, Lynn,
and an alum.
Right. And I told Lynn as soon as Dr. Carrier retired, I said, we're going to see Kirk Cox because he's going to be something. And guess what? He ends up being the speaker.
That's right.
And so that's the kind of things you got to do up there.
Right. So you ran the Division of Administration and Finance for years, and for folks who don't know the structure of the university, that's the groundskeepers, that's the folks cleaning buildings, that's the HVAC guys, and a lot of those folks don't have the means to send their kids to college. And Charlie, you created an endowed fund, the Administration and Finance Endowed Scholarship Fund, which is now called the Charles W. King Endowed Scholarship Fund, which is aimed at allowing folks in administration and finance to not only give money, but to fund their children's ability to come to school who otherwise might not have. Right. That's going to be one of your greatest legacies. Was that important to you?
It was extremely important. I've told people this over and over again. I think the one thing I would point to I'm the proudest of is creating that scholarship. We were at a period of time at this university where fundraising was a focus, and I went to our division and I said, look, we need to participate in giving back to the university. And I said, I promise you, if you will participate, I'll put up the first $1,000 to start it, and we will give that money back to the students or relatives of the employees in the Administration Finance Division. And I asked them, I'll never forget, I said, give me $1 a week. I said, that's probably less than you're spending in the vending machines on campus. Not everybody participated, mm-hmm. but a huge number participated. In a very short period of time, we were awarding about $5,000 worth of scholarships. Mm-hmm. Our goal was to award 5 full scholarships at some point. Since that time, we've raised over $1.8 million. It's in the fund now, and we've given hundreds of scholarships to students that otherwise probably wouldn't have got to go to school. And one of the things that's so rewarding is each year the advancement staff asks these kids that get these scholarships mm-hmm. to write thank you letters. Mm-hmm. And some of them are just break your heart almost and make you feel so good about what you've done because they wouldn't have got to go to school. And they're so thankful and appreciative of those scholarships. And I think the parents were just as happy too. And what always worried me a little bit was you got people in the division that don't have any children mm-hmm. or their children's already gone through school. But it didn't make any difference. They got big smiles on their face because we awarded those scholarships every year at my annual meeting. And it was probably the highlight of the annual meeting, getting to see those kids come up on the stage and get their scholarship.
Wow. Well, it reminds you of why we're here.
Exactly.
Right? What's
Exactly.
important.
Right.
Well, Interim President Charlie King, thanks so much for being on Being the Change with us today. Good luck during your interim presidency.
I'll take all that I can get.
If you need anything from us, just let us know. And all of our listeners, if you got any ideas for other Being the Change podcasts, you can email us at beingthechange@jmu.edu. Until the next episode, go Dukes.
Thanks for listening. Tune in next time to hear another story of how members of the James Madison University community are being the change. Dive deeper and consume countless other stories at jmu.edu/Madison Magazine. Go Dukes!
The Being the Change podcast was conceived by Jim Heffernan, editor of Madison Magazine, and me, Andy Perrine, head of JMU Marketing. Thanks to Jenna Polk and the team at Rose Library Studios, where the show is recorded by Steve Adderton, the guy who also captures those amazing campus drone shots you see on Instagram. Original music and episode production by Neil Perrine. All of us involved in creating Being the Change are JMU alumni, and we bleed purple. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.